The single father nobody noticed was about to rescue the woman everyone feared, and neither of them would survive it unchanged. When Ethan Rowe pulled a bleeding stranger from twisted metal on a rain-soaked Portland dock, he had no idea he'd just kidnapped America's most dangerous billionaire. Victoria Sinclair was supposed to die that night. Instead, she woke up hidden in a mechanic's spare bedroom, surrounded by motorcycle parts and a little girl's crayon drawings. The men hunting her would burn everything to find her, and the quiet man protecting her was about to lose the only life he had left. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down like nails against the windshield. Ethan Rowe squinted through the downpour, his ancient Ford pickup shuddering as he navigated the empty industrial road near the Portland docks. It was past 11 and he should have been home an hour ago. Sophie would be asleep by now. Mrs. Chen from downstairs always put her to bed when he worked late. But guilt still twisted in his chest. Third time this week he'd missed bedtime stories. The engine coughed. Ethan patted the dashboard like it was a dying dog. "Come on, girl, just get me home." He was 32 years old and felt 50. His hands were permanently stained with engine grease. His back ached from hunching over motorcycles all day. And his bank account had exactly $214 until Friday. Rent was due Tuesday. Sophie needed new shoes. The electric bill was already 2 weeks overdue. He'd rebuild a 1974 Triumph Bonneville tomorrow if the parts shipment came through. Maybe that'd bring in enough to stop the bleeding for another month. Maybe. The truck's headlights barely cut through the rain. This stretch of road was usually deserted after dark. Just warehouses and shipping containers. And the kind of silence that made you remember Portland used to be smaller, quieter, before the tech money flooded in and gentrified everything except the forgotten corners where people like Ethan still existed. That's when he saw the car. It was wrapped around a concrete pillar off the side of the road, steam rising from the crushed hood, driver's door hanging open like a broken jaw. The vehicle was expensive, some kind of black luxury sedan that probably cost more than Ethan would make in 5 years. But it was destroyed now, front end accordioned, glass scattered across the wet pavement like diamonds. Ethan hit the brakes. His truck skidded slightly on the slick road before jerking to a stop about 30 feet away. He sat there for a moment, engine idling, wipers scraping across the windshield in rhythmic protest. Every instinct told him to keep driving. Call 911, sure. But don't stop. Don't get involved. He had Sophie to think about. He couldn't afford complications, couldn't afford to be a witness to whatever the hell had happened here. Rich people and their problems, that wasn't his world. But then he saw her. A woman, crawling away from the wreckage. She moved slowly, dragging herself across the pavement with what looked like her last reserves of strength. Her clothes were dark and torn, her hair matted with rain and something that might have been blood. Shit. Ethan killed the engine and climbed out. The rain immediately soaked through his flannel shirt. He jogged toward the woman, boots splashing through puddles, and that's when he noticed the other details. Skid marks leading to the crash. The smell of burned rubber mixing with gasoline. And, this made his stomach drop, bullet holes. 3 of them, punched through the driver's side door. This wasn't an accident. "Ma'am?" Ethan dropped to a crouch beside her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" The woman lifted her head. Even in the dark, even through the rain and blood, Ethan could tell she was stunning. Late 20s or early 30s, sharp features, the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers or corporate boardrooms. Her eyes found his, gray, cold, furious, and for a second she looked like she might tell him to go to hell. Instead, she collapsed. Ethan caught her before her face hit the pavement. Okay, you're okay." He wasn't sure if he was talking to her or himself. His hands shook as he checked her pulse, weak but steady, and looked for injuries. Gash on her forehead, bruising already forming on her arms. Something wrong with her left leg, the way it bent. She needed a hospital. He pulled out his phone, started to dial 911, and then froze. Headlights. Coming fast down the road from the direction the woman's car had come from. 2 vehicles. Black SUVs, moving like they were hunting something. Ethan looked down at the woman in his arms, at the bullet holes in her car, at the desperation that had been in her eyes before she passed out. His thumb hovered over the call button. The SUVs were getting closer. Damn it. He shoved his phone back in his pocket, hooked his arms under the woman's shoulders, and dragged her toward his truck. She was heavier than she looked, dead weight, unconscious, and his boots kept slipping on the wet pavement. By the time he got her to the passenger side, his lungs were burning and the headlights were close enough that he could hear the engines. He practically threw her into the cab, buckled her in with shaking hands, and slammed the door. The SUVs were maybe 200 yards away now. Ethan sprinted around to the driver's side, jumped in, turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, and for one heart-stopping moment, he thought it wouldn't start. Then it caught with a rattling growl that sounded like a miracle. He yanked the truck into gear and pulled away from the wreck just as the first SUV's headlight swept across the crash site. In his rearview mirror, Ethan watched both vehicles screech to a stop. Men got out, 4 of them. They moved toward the wrecked sedan with the efficiency of people who'd done this before. One of them started shouting into a phone. Ethan pressed the accelerator down and tried not to think about what he'd just done. Right. The woman didn't wake up during the drive home. Ethan kept checking her pulse at red lights, kept making sure she was still breathing. He didn't know her name, didn't know why someone had shot at her, or who those men were. All he knew was that he'd just complicated his life in ways he didn't understand yet, and probably couldn't afford. His apartment was in a rundown complex on the east side, the kind of place where the elevator only worked half the time and the hallways smelled like curry and cigarette smoke. He parked in his usual spot and sat there for a moment, staring at the unconscious woman in his passenger seat. What the hell was he supposed to do now? Take her to the hospital and they'd ask questions. Questions he couldn't answer. Questions that might involve police and reporters and the kind of attention that people like Ethan spent their whole lives avoiding. But leaving her untreated could kill her. He ran a hand through his wet hair and made a decision he knew he'd probably regret. Getting her upstairs took 15 minutes and nearly gave him a hernia. The elevator was broken. Of course it was. So Ethan had to carry her up 3 flights of stairs, praying none of his neighbors opened their doors and saw him hauling an unconscious woman into his apartment like some kind of criminal. Mrs. Chen's door stayed closed. So did everyone else's. Small miracles. By the time Ethan kicked open his own door and carried the woman inside, his arms felt like they might fall off. He laid her on his couch, the only piece of furniture in his living room besides a coffee table and a TV that barely worked, and stepped back, breathing hard. The apartment was small. 1 bedroom that Sophie slept in, a bathroom with a shower that only produced lukewarm water, and this living room that doubled as Ethan's bedroom most nights. He slept on the couch, had been sleeping on the couch for 3 years. Sophie deserved the bed. The woman looked out of place here like someone had dropped a piece of expensive art in a thrift store, even unconscious, even bleeding. She had this quality about her, this presence that suggested she was used to better surroundings. Ethan grabbed towels from the bathroom and his first aid kit from under the sink. It wasn't much: bandages, antiseptic, pain pills he'd bought when he threw out his back last month, but it was what he had. He cleaned the gash on her forehead first. It wasn't as bad as he'd feared, but she'd have a nasty scar. Then he checked her leg. Not broken, he didn't think, but badly bruised. She'd be limping for a while. The whole time he worked, his mind kept circling back to the same questions. Who was she? Why did someone want her dead? And what the hell had he gotten himself into? He was bandaging her forehead when she woke up. Her eyes snapped open, those cold gray eyes, and her hand shot out, grabbing his wrist with surprising strength. For a woman who'd just been in a car crash, she moved fast. Where am I? Her voice was hoarse but steady, controlled, like she was used to asking questions and getting answers. You're safe, Ethan said, trying to keep his voice calm. You were in an accident. I brought you here. Where is here? Portland, my apartment. She stared at him for a long moment, her grip still tight on his wrist. Then she looked around, at the water-stained ceiling, at the peeling wallpaper, at the toys scattered in the corner where Sophie had been playing before Mrs. Chen took her to bed. Something shifted in her expression. Not disgust exactly, more like calculation. Who are you? She asked. Ethan Rowe, I'm a mechanic. I found you on the side of the road near the docks. Your car was wrecked, and there were men coming, so He stopped. I didn't know what else to do. She let go of his wrist and tried to sit up. Pain flashed across her face, and she gasped, clutching her ribs. Don't move, Ethan said quickly. You're hurt. I think you might have cracked something. I need a phone. You need a doctor. I need a phone. Her voice went sharp. Now, Suam. Ethan hesitated, then handed her his cell. She took it, started to dial, and then stopped. Her fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before she slowly lowered the phone. They'll be monitoring everything, she said, more to herself than to him. Every call, every transaction. Who will? She didn't answer. Instead, she looked at him again with those calculating eyes. You said your name was Ethan Rowe? Yeah. You live here? In this apartment? Yeah. Alone? With my daughter. She's 8. She's asleep. Ethan crossed his arms. Look, lady, I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, but those men at your car, they weren't cops. They moved like private security. Maybe worse. So if you're going to stay here, I need to know what I'm dealing with. For a moment, he thought she might tell him. Her mouth opened slightly and something vulnerable flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or exhaustion. But then the walls came back up and her expression went cold again. You should have left me there, she said. Probably. Why didn't you? Ethan shrugged. Guess I'm stupid. Well, the corner of her mouth might have twitched. Or maybe he imagined it. What's your name? He asked. She hesitated. Then, Victoria. Victoria what? Just Victoria, for now. Ethan studied her. She was lying, obviously, or at least not telling the whole truth. But he was too tired to push. All right, just Victoria. You can stay here tonight. Tomorrow we figure out what to do next. He grabbed a blanket from the closet and tossed it to her. There's water in the kitchen if you need it. Bathroom's down the hall. Try not to bleed on the couch too much. It's the only one I've got. Victoria caught the blanket but didn't say anything. Ethan headed toward the hallway, then paused at the door to Sophie's room. He could hear his daughter's soft breathing through the thin walls. Safe. Asleep. Unaware that her father had just brought a stranger into their home. A stranger who came with bullet holes and men in black SUVs. He really was stupid, but when he glanced back at Victoria, at the way she'd curled up on his couch like she was trying to make herself as small as possible, he didn't regret it. Not yet, anyway. But Sophie found Victoria at 6 in the morning. Ethan woke to his daughter's voice, high-pitched, curious, completely lacking any sense of danger, coming from the living room. Daddy, there's a lady on our couch. He shot upright from where he'd been sleeping on the floor beside Sophie's bed, his back screaming in protest, and stumbled into the living room still half asleep. Victoria was already awake, sitting stiffly on the couch with the blanket pulled up to her chin. Sophie stood about 3 feet away, staring at her with the unfiltered fascination only an 8-year-old could manage. Sophie, honey, come here. Ethan positioned himself between his daughter and the stranger, protective instinct kicking in. Who is she? Sophie asked, not moving. This is Victoria. She's a friend. She's going to be staying with us for a little while. Why? Because she needs help. Sophie considered this, then looked at Victoria with concern. Are you sick? Victoria blinked. She seemed thrown by the question, like she'd expected something else. I'm fine, she said, her voice softer than it had been last night. You have a bandage on your head. I had an accident. What kind of accident? Sophie, Ethan said firmly. Why don't you go get dressed for school? You can ask Victoria questions later. Sophie pouted but obeyed, shooting one last curious glance at Victoria before disappearing into her bedroom. Once she was gone, Ethan turned back to Victoria. How are you feeling? Like I was in a car accident. She shifted slightly and winced. But alive. Thank you for that. Yeah, well. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. We need to talk about what happens next. Those men last night will be looking for me. I know. So what do we do? Asked. Victoria was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. When she spoke, her voice was carefully neutral. I need to stay hidden, just for a few days, maybe a week, until I can figure out who's trying to kill me and why. And then what? Then I disappear. Permanently, if necessary. Ethan stared at her. You're serious? Yes. Lady, I don't know what kind of life you've got, but you can't just disappear. What about your family? Your job? Something dark crossed Victoria's face. I don't have family, and my job is complicated. What do you do? It doesn't matter. It matters if it's going to get my daughter killed. Victoria flinched like he'd slapped her. Good. She needed to understand what was at stake here. You're right, she said after a moment. You're absolutely right, which is why I should leave. Now, before they track me here. She tried to stand and immediately gasped, clutching her ribs again. Ethan caught her before she fell. You're not going anywhere like this, he said. You can barely walk. I'll manage. You'll get yourself killed. Better me than you and your daughter. Yeah. Ethan helped her back onto the couch, frustration building in his chest. This woman was infuriating, proud and stubborn and completely unreasonable. But she was also terrified. He could see it in the way her hands shook, in the tightness around her eyes. Listen, he said, keeping his voice low so Sophie wouldn't hear. I pulled you out of that wreck. I brought you here. So you're my responsibility now, whether I like it or not. And I'm not throwing an injured woman out on the street where someone can finish what they started. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay here. You're going to rest. And when you're strong enough to walk without falling over, we'll figure out a plan. Understood? He gets. Victoria stared at him like she'd never been spoken to that way in her life. Why? She finally asked. Why what? Why are you helping me? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Ethan thought about that. Thought about the bullet holes in her car. Thought about the way she'd looked when she woke up. Like she'd expected to be dead. Because someone should, he said simply. Before Victoria could respond, Sophie burst back into the room wearing mismatched socks and a shirt with a unicorn on it. Daddy, we're out of cereal again. Ethan sighed. Right, normal life. Bills and breakfast and getting his kid to school on time. I'll grab some on the way home from work, he said, then looked at Victoria. You going to be okay here by yourself? I've been taking care of myself for a long time. That's not what I asked. Victoria's jaw tightened. I'll be fine, of course. Ethan didn't entirely believe her, but what choice did he have? He couldn't miss work, not with rent due and Sophie depending on him. So he made sure Victoria had his number, showed her where the food was, and told her not to answer the door for anyone. Then he took Sophie to school and tried not to think about the dangerous stranger he'd left alone in his apartment. The garage where Ethan worked was called Rose Custom Shop, which was technically accurate even though Ethan didn't own it anymore. He used to. Had started the business right after Sophie was born, back when he was young and stupid and thought hard work was enough to build something lasting. For a while it had been good. Great even. He'd built a reputation for quality work, had steady clients, had actually started to believe he might make something of himself. Then Sophie's mother left. Just walked out one morning when Sophie was 2 years old. No warning, no explanation beyond a note that said she couldn't do this anymore. Couldn't be a mother. Couldn't be tied down. Ethan had tried to hold things together, but running a business and raising a toddler alone was like trying to climb a mountain with a backpack full of rocks. Within a year, he'd burned through his savings. Within 2, he was drowning in debt. So he sold the business to Marcus Webb, a friend who'd been his first employee. Marcus let him keep working there, let him keep his name on the sign out of loyalty. But Ethan wasn't the owner anymore. He was just another mechanic trading labor for a paycheck that never seemed to be enough. You look like hell, Marcus said when Ethan walked in that morning. Didn't sleep much. Sophie keep you up? Something like that. Marcus was a good guy. Mid-40s, built like a barrel, with hands that could tear an engine apart and put it back together blindfolded. He'd saved Ethan's life by buying the shop, even if the reminder of what he'd lost sometimes stung. Got the Triumph parts in, Marcus said, nodding toward a box in the corner. You still planning to rebuild that thing? Yeah, customers paying cash if I can finish by Friday. That'll be tight. I'll make it work. Ethan spent the morning stripping down the old Bonneville, losing himself in the familiar rhythm of disassembly. Motorcycles made sense. You could take them apart, figure out what was broken, fix it. Unlike people. Unlike lives. Around noon, his phone rang. Unknown number. Ethan almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Hello? Silence on the other end. Then quietly, it's Victoria. His stomach dropped. What's wrong? Nothing. I just... She paused. I don't know how to use your coffee maker. Ethan blinked. What? Your coffee maker. I can't figure out how to turn it on. There's no touch screen. Despite everything, Ethan felt a laugh bubbling up. It's not digital. You just push the button on the side. Oh. Another pause. Right. She sounded embarrassed. This woman who'd been so cold and calculating last night now sounded embarrassed because she couldn't work a $20 coffee maker from Walmart. You going to be okay? Ethan asked. Yes, sorry. I shouldn't have called. Victoria. But she'd already hung up. Ethan stared at his phone, a strange feeling settling in his chest. Then he went back to work. He came home that evening to find his apartment transformed. Not physically. It still looked like the same cramped space with water-stained ceilings and peeling wallpaper. But something felt different. Cleaner, maybe. More organized. Victoria was sitting on the couch where he'd left her, but now she was surrounded by papers. His papers. Bills and tax forms and Sophie's school notices that he'd been meaning to sort through for months. What are you doing? Ethan asked slowly. Victoria looked up. She'd showered somehow. Her hair was damp, pulled back in a ponytail, and changed into a pair of his sweatpants and an old flannel shirt that hung loose on her frame. She looked less like a corporate professional and more like someone who might actually belong in his apartment. Your finances are a disaster, she said bluntly. Excuse me? You're 3 months behind on your electric bill. Your truck needs repairs you can't afford. And you're paying twice what you should on insurance because you haven't shopped around in years. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. You went through my stuff? You left it on the coffee table. That doesn't mean you get to be... I can fix this, Victoria interrupted. Some of it anyway. If you let me make a few calls, I can reduce your monthly expenses by at least $400. Maybe more. Ethan stared at her. Who the hell are you? Victoria's expression shuddered. Someone who's good with numbers. No, you're someone who's used to having power, used to making calls and getting things done, used to people listening when you talk. Ethan stepped closer. So I'm going to ask you again. Who are you really? For a long moment, Victoria didn't answer. Then she set down the papers and met his eyes. My name is Victoria Sinclair, she said quietly. And until 3 days ago, I was the CEO of Sinclair Technologies. The name hit Ethan like a physical blow. Even someone as disconnected as him had heard of Sinclair Technologies. It was one of the biggest tech companies in the world. Artificial intelligence. Cloud computing. Contracts with the government worth billions. And Victoria Sinclair wasn't just the CEO. She was the Ice Queen. That's what the media called her. The youngest self-made female billionaire in American history. Known for hostile takeovers and ruthless business decisions. Known for firing executives who couldn't keep up. Known for never smiling in photographs. You're her, Ethan said, his voice flat. The woman from the news. The one everyone says disappeared after a car accident. What? Victoria nodded. They think I'm dead. Most of them, anyway. The ones who tried to kill me hope I'm dead. The ones who want my company assume I'm dead. But you're not. No, thanks to you. Ethan sank onto the chair across from her, his mind racing. He'd rescued a billionaire. He'd brought America's most recognizable female CEO into his apartment and given her his sweatpants. Why? He asked. Why would someone try to kill you? Victoria's laugh was bitter. Take your pick. I've made plenty of enemies, competitors I've crushed, executives I've fired, ex-business partners who think I stole their ideas. What about your board? Your security? My head of security is the one who arranged the car accident. Victoria's voice went cold. And my board? Half of them have been plotting to remove me for months. They think I'm too aggressive, too difficult, too unwilling to compromise. So they tried to murder you. Corporate warfare isn't always metaphorical. Ethan rubbed his face. This was insane. This was so far beyond anything he'd signed up for. You need to go to the police, he said. I can't. Not yet. Why not? Because I don't know who I can trust. If I surface now, they'll finish what they started. I need time to gather evidence, time to figure out exactly who's behind this, and time to make sure that when I do come back, I can destroy them completely. There was something terrifying about the way she said that last part, like she meant it literally. How long? Ethan asked. A week, maybe less. And then? Then I disappear again. Permanently, like I said. Ethan thought about Sophie, thought about their quiet life, thought about how easily this could all fall apart. You can't stay here, he said. Victoria's expression didn't change. I know. Sophie doesn't need to be anywhere near this. I know, and I don't... Ethan stopped, frustrated. I don't have the resources to protect you. I can barely protect myself. I'm not asking you to protect me. Then what are you asking? Victoria was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd heard it. Nothing. You've already done more than you should have. I'll leave tonight. I'll figure something out. She started gathering the papers, her movements stiff with pain, and Ethan realized she was serious. She would leave, would walk out that door injured and vulnerable, and try to survive on her own because she'd spent her whole life believing she had to, just like him. Wait, he said. Victoria paused. 1 week? Ethan said. You can stay 1 week. But after that, this is done. You go back to your world, I go back to mine, and we pretend this never happened. Understood? Victoria looked at him with something that might have been gratitude. Understood. That night, after Sophie went to bed, Ethan and Victoria sat in the living room not quite looking at each other. Tell me about your daughter, Victoria said eventually. Why? Because I've been living in your home for a day and I don't know anything about you except that you're a mechanic who makes poor life decisions. Despite himself, Ethan smiled. Her name's Sophie. She's 8. She likes unicorns and drawing and asking questions I can't answer. Where's her mother? Mom. Gone. Left when Sophie was 2. I'm sorry, Ethan shrugged. Yeah, me too. Do you regret it? Raising her alone? Every day. And never. Victoria seemed to consider this. She seems happy. She deserves better than this. Ethan gestured around the apartment. Better than secondhand clothes and a father who can barely pay rent. But I'm doing my best. Your best is pretty good. Well, something in her voice made Ethan look at her. Really look at her. And for the first time since he'd pulled her from that wreck, he saw past the Ice Queen reputation, past the billions of dollars and corporate power. He saw someone lonely. Tell me about your life, he said. He said. What do you want to know? I don't know. What does a billionaire CEO do for fun? Victoria's smile was sad. I don't have fun. I work. That's all I've ever done. No hobbies, no friends. I have associates, people I do business with. That's not the same thing. No, Victoria agreed quietly. It's not. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Someone's TV played too loud through the thin walls. Can I ask you something? Victoria said. Sure. Why haven't you asked me for money? Ethan frowned. Why would I? Because I have it. Because you clearly need it. Because most people, if they found themselves sheltering a billionaire, would see it as an opportunity. I'm not most people. No. Victoria studied him with those gray eyes. You're really not. Ethan felt something shift between them. Something he didn't entirely understand but couldn't ignore. I should get some sleep, he said, standing. You need anything? No, thank you. He headed toward Sophie's room, then paused. Victoria? Yeah? You're safe here. Whatever's coming, whatever happens, you're safe here. Victoria didn't respond, but when Ethan glanced back, she was looking at him like he'd said something in a language she'd forgotten she understood. Like maybe, for the first time in a long time, she actually believed it. The next morning, everything changed. Ethan was making breakfast. burnt toast and scrambled eggs that Sophie would complain about but eat anyway, when Victoria emerged from the living room holding his laptop. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked, seeing her expression. Victoria turned the laptop toward him. On the screen was a news article. The headline read, "Sinclair Technologies. CEO Victoria. Sinclair presumed dead after suspicious car accident." Below it was her photo, that cold professional headshot that made her look untouchable. "They've moved faster than I expected," Victoria said. "My board announced an emergency meeting for tomorrow. They're planning to vote on my replacement. Can they do that? If I'm dead? Yes. But you're not dead. They don't know that. And even if they did, I can't prove who tried to kill me. Not yet." Victoria's hands tightened on the laptop. "If they vote me out tomorrow, I'll lose everything. My company, my legacy, everything I've built. So what do you do?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at Ethan with something like determination. "I fight back." And watching her stand there in his kitchen, wearing his old clothes in his falling-apart apartment, Ethan realized something. He'd rescued her from a car accident, but the real crash was only just beginning. Victoria started making phone calls that afternoon. Not from Ethan's cell. She'd explained that was too risky, too easy to trace. Instead, she'd sent him to a convenience store 3 blocks away to buy prepaid phones with cash. 2 of them. Untraceable, she'd said, at least for a few days. Ethan had stood in line at the store feeling like a criminal, the clerk eyeing him suspiciously as he counted out crumpled bills for burner phones like he was about to orchestrate a drug deal. This was his life now, apparently, aiding and abetting a fugitive billionaire. When he got back to the apartment, Victoria was pacing in the living room despite the obvious pain in her leg. She grabbed the phones without thanking him and immediately started dialing numbers from memory. The first 3 calls went to voicemail. No one was answering her. "Damn it!" Victoria threw the phone onto the couch. "They've been warned not to talk to me." "Who has?" "Everyone. My legal team, my accountant, even my assistant." She ran a hand through her hair, frustration cracking through that icy exterior. "They're isolating me. Standard corporate coup tactics. Make sure the target has no allies, no resources, no way to fight back." "Shifty Shasam." As Ethan leaned against the wall, watching her. "So what now?" "I need to get into my company's servers, access my files. There's evidence there, communications, financial records, security footage. Something that'll prove who orchestrated the accident." "Can you do that from here?" "Oh, eh." Victoria looked around his apartment like she was seeing it for the first time. The ancient desktop computer in the corner that Ethan mostly used to print Sophie's homework assignments. The Wi-Fi router that cut out every time it rained. "No," she admitted. "I'd need real equipment, a secure connection, time." "How much time?" "More than I have." She sat down heavily on the couch, and for a moment she looked lost. Not like the Ice Queen from the news, just like a woman who'd lost everything and didn't know how to get it back. Ethan surprised himself by sitting down beside her. "Tell me about the board meeting," he said. "The one tomorrow. What happens if you don't show up?" "They vote on my replacement. My CFO, probably. Robert Chen. He's been positioning himself for months. And if you do show up?" Victoria's laugh was bitter. "Then I walk into a room full of people who either want me dead or want me gone. Either way, I lose. Unless you prove who tried to kill you first, which I can't do without access to my company's systems." They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, Ethan could hear kids playing in the courtyard, their shouts echoing off the buildings. Normal life continuing while his unraveled. "What if you had an ally?" Ethan asked slowly. "Someone inside your company. Someone they wouldn't suspect." Victoria looked at him. "I don't have anyone like that. Not anymore." "What about people they fired? People who have reasons to hate your board?" Something flickered in Victoria's eyes. "There's someone, maybe, but I haven't spoken to her in 2 years. Why not?" "Because I'm the one who fired her." Ethan waited. Victoria sighed. "Her name is Jennifer Park. She was my head of product development. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But she made a mistake. Greenlit a project that cost us $50 million when it failed. The board wanted her gone. I should have fought for her. Instead, I let them push her out." "You think she'd help you now?" I think she'd laugh in my face. Or hang up. Probably both. Only one way to find out. Victoria stared at the burner phone like it might bite her. Then she picked it up and dialed. The phone rang 4 times before someone answered. Hello? The voice was wary, suspicious, young. Jennifer. It's Victoria Sinclair. Silence, then, this is a joke, meh. It's not. Victoria Sinclair is dead. It's all over the news. I'm very much alive, and I need your help. More silence. Ethan could hear breathing on the other end of the line, someone trying to decide if this was real or an elaborate prank. Why would I help you? Jennifer finally said. You destroyed my career. I know. You threw me away like I was nothing. I know. And now you want a favor? Victoria closed her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was quieter than Ethan had ever heard it. I was wrong. What I did to you, it was cowardly and wrong. You deserved better. And I'm sorry. Ethan blinked. He'd known Victoria less than 48 hours, but he'd already figured out that apologizing probably wasn't something she did often. Maybe ever. Jennifer must have realized it too, because her tone shifted slightly. What do you want? I need someone to access Sinclair Technologies' internal servers. Someone they won't be watching. Someone who still has old credentials they might not have deactivated. They deactivated mine the day they fired me. Are you sure? A pause. No. Will you try? Another pause, longer this time. Then, what's in it for me? If I get my company back, you get your job back. With a promotion and a formal apology in front of the entire executive team. And if you don't get it back? Victoria smiled grimly. Then we're both screwed. Jennifer laughed. A real laugh. Sharp and surprised. You know what? Fine, I'm in. But only because I want to watch you burn everything down on your way back up. I can work with that. They talked for another 10 minutes, Victoria giving instructions, Jennifer asking technical questions that went completely over Ethan's head. When Victoria finally hung up, she looked exhausted but also energized in a way she hadn't been before. She's going to try tonight, Victoria said. If her credentials still work, she'll download everything I need. Financial records, email chains, security logs. And if they don't work, then I show up to that board meeting tomorrow with nothing and hope I'm intimidating enough to bluff my way through. Ethan snorted. You're definitely intimidating. Is that a compliment? I honestly don't know. Victoria's mouth twitched into something that might have been a smile. It looked unpracticed, like her face didn't quite remember how. The door to Sophie's room opened and his daughter emerged wearing her pajamas, even though it was only 5 in the afternoon. Daddy, can Victoria read me a story tonight? Ethan glanced at Victoria, expecting her to make an excuse. But instead she looked genuinely surprised. You want me to read to you? Sophie nodded enthusiastically. You have a pretty voice, like a news lady. Victoria actually laughed. I used to be on the news sometimes. Really? Were you famous? Some people thought so. Cool. Sophie grabbed Victoria's hand, completely oblivious to how that simple gesture made the billionaire stiffen. Come on, I'll show you my books. Victoria let herself be dragged toward Sophie's room, glancing back at Ethan with an expression somewhere between panic and bewilderment. Ethan just shrugged. Don't let her con you into reading more than 3. She'll try. 20 minutes later, he heard Victoria's voice through the thin walls reading something about a dragon and a princess who didn't need rescuing. Her tone was careful at first, stilted, like she was reading a corporate presentation. But gradually it softened, became more natural. Sophie laughed at something. Victoria laughed back. Ethan stood in the kitchen making dinner, pasta again, because it was cheap and he knew how to cook it without burning things, and tried to reconcile the woman reading. Bedtime stories in his daughter's room with the ice queen who'd built a tech empire on ruthless business decisions. They didn't match. Or maybe they did, and he just didn't understand her yet. He was draining the pasta when his phone rang. Unknown number. Ethan answered cautiously. Hello? Woo? Is this Ethan Rowe? The voice was male, professional, cold. Who's asking? My name is Daniel Garrett. I'm head of security for Sinclair Technologies. I believe you have something that belongs to us. Ethan's blood went cold. He glanced toward Sophie's room where Victoria was still reading. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult my intelligence. We have footage from the dock, your truck, your license plate. You removed Victoria Sinclair from the scene of the accident. Well, I saw a car wreck. I called 911. No, you didn't. We checked. Ethan's mind raced. How had they found him so fast? How much did they actually know? Where is she, Mr. Rowe? I don't know what... You have a daughter, Sophie, age 8, attends Woodlawn Elementary. I'd hate for anything to happen to her. The threat was delivered so casually, it took Ethan a moment to process it. When he did, rage flooded through him so intensely his hands shook. You stay away from my daughter. Darwers yeet this. Then tell me where Victoria Sinclair is. Go to hell. Ethan hung up. His hands were still shaking. He stared at the phone, half expecting it to ring again, but it stayed silent. Victoria appeared in the kitchen doorway. She must have heard his voice through the walls. What happened? They found me. Security from your company. They know I pulled you out of the wreck. Ethan set the phone down carefully, afraid if he held it any longer he might throw it. They threatened Sophie. Victoria's face went white. I'm leaving. Right now. What? This is exactly what I was afraid of. They're coming after you because of me. I won't let Sophie get hurt because... Stop. Ethan grabbed her arm as she tried to move past him. Just stop. Running isn't going to protect her. They already know who I am. They already have my information. Leaving now just means we're both vulnerable. Then what do you suggest? We move faster than they do. Ethan pulled out the burner phone Victoria had been using. Call Jennifer. Tell her we need those files tonight, not tomorrow. Tonight. That's not enough time. She'd have to... Then it'll have to be enough. Because if they're willing to threaten an 8-year-old girl, they're willing to do a lot worse. And I'm not sitting around waiting for them to make the next move. Victoria stared at him for a long moment. Then she took the phone and started dialing. While she talked to Jennifer, Ethan checked on Sophie. His daughter was lying in bed surrounded by stuffed animals, completely content, completely unaware that someone had just threatened her life. Daddy? She looked up at him with sleepy eyes. Is Victoria going to stay forever? No, honey, just for a little while. I like her. She does different voices for all the characters. Ethan smoothed Sophie's hair back from her forehead. Go to sleep, okay? I'll be right in the living room if you need me. Okay. Love you, Daddy. Love you too, kiddo. He kissed her forehead and turned off the light, leaving the door cracked open the way she liked it. Then he went back to the kitchen where Victoria was still on the phone. How fast can you work? Victoria was saying. No, I understand the risks, but we're out of time. She hung up and looked at Ethan. Jennifer says she can try tonight, but it's going to be messy. She'll have to access the servers remotely, which means leaving a digital trail. If security catches her, they'll lock everything down. How long will it take? 2 hours? Maybe 3. Then we wait. They ate dinner in tense silence. Ethan had made enough pasta for Victoria, but she barely touched it, too wired to eat. She kept checking the burner phone like she could will it to ring faster. Around 8, Sophie called for water. Ethan brought her a glass and found Victoria sitting on the edge of his daughter's bed, looking at the crayon drawings taped to the walls. She's talented, Victoria said quietly. She gets it from her mother. I can barely draw stick figures. Where's her mother now? No idea. San Francisco last I heard, maybe L.A. Ethan leaned against the doorframe. She sends a birthday card sometimes, never includes a return address. That must be hard. For both of you. Sophie handles it better than I do. Kids are resilient like that. He paused. What about you? You said you don't have family. My parents died when I was 16. Car accident, ironically. Victoria's voice was carefully neutral. No siblings, no aunts or uncles worth mentioning. I built my company from nothing because I had nothing else. That's lonely. It's efficient. It's still lonely. Victoria didn't argue. She just looked at Sophie's drawings, stick figure families with triangle houses and circle suns, like they were evidence of something she'd never quite understood. The phone rang at 9:45. Victoria nearly dropped it in her rush to answer. Did you get it? Ethan couldn't hear Jennifer's response, but he watched Victoria's expression shift from tense to shocked to something that looked almost like vindication. You're sure? You have proof? More talking on the other end. Send everything to this number, encrypted. I'll download it tonight. Victoria hung up and looked at Ethan with wild eyes. She got it. All of it. Financial transfers, email chains, security footage from the night of the accident. And? That's sadism. And it's worse than I thought. Victoria started pacing again, her injured leg making her gait uneven. It wasn't just my head of security. It was my CFO, Robert Chen, the man they're planning to vote in as my replacement. He orchestrated everything. Why on most sats? Because I was about to fire him. I discovered he'd been embezzling funds for months, millions of dollars funneled through fake contractors and offshore accounts. When he realized I knew, he decided to eliminate the problem. Victoria's laugh was sharp. He tried to kill me so he could take my job and cover up his own crimes. Can you prove it? Jennifer sent me everything. Bank records, emails between Chen and my security chief planning the accident. Even footage of them meeting 2 days before the crash. Victoria's hands were shaking as she clutched the phone. I have enough evidence to destroy him, to destroy all of them. Then you call the police, right now, tonight. No. Ethan stared at her. What do you mean, no? If I go to the police, this becomes a legal battle that drags on for months, years maybe. Chen has lawyers. He'll tie everything up in court while my company falls apart. So what's your plan? Victoria's eyes went cold. That Ice Queen expression sliding back into place like armor. I'm going to that board meeting tomorrow, and I'm going to end him myself. The way she said it made Ethan's skin crawl. Not because it was violent, but because it was so absolutely certain. Victoria. He tried to murder me. He threatened you and your daughter. He stole from my company and then tried to steal my legacy. Her voice was low, controlled, furious. I'm not letting him walk away from this. I'm not saying let him walk away. I'm saying do it the right way. The right way takes too long. And in the meantime, everyone I care about is in danger. Everyone you care about? Ethan repeated. You've known me for 2 days. Victoria stopped pacing, looked at him directly. You're the first person in 10 years who's treated me like a human being instead of a business opportunity. Your daughter read me bedtime stories and held my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. You live in a falling apart apartment and work yourself to exhaustion just to give her a good life, and you don't complain about it. You just do it. Her voice cracked slightly. So yes, I care, and I'm not letting Chen hurt you because I was too weak to stop him. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. Before he could figure it out, headlights swept across the living room window. They both froze. A car had pulled up outside the building. Black SUV. Expensive. They found us, Victoria whispered. Ethan moved to the window, staying back from the glass. 2 men got out of the SUV. Big guys, professional. One of them spoke into a radio. We need to go, Ethan said. Now? Where's? I don't know. Anywhere but here. He grabbed his keys and his wallet. Victoria was already moving toward Sophie's room, but Ethan caught her arm. I'll get her. You grab your phone and those files Jennifer sent. They moved fast. Ethan scooped Sophie out of bed. She mumbled in protest, but didn't fully wake, while Victoria gathered the burner phones and shoved them in her pockets. 30 seconds, maybe less. Footsteps in the hallway outside. Ethan looked at Victoria, looked at his daughter sleeping in his arms, made a decision. Fire escape, back window. They didn't have time to discuss it. Ethan led them into the bathroom where a tiny window opened onto the rusted fire escape he'd always meant to report to the landlord but never had. He shoved it open, the old metal screeching in protest. Someone knocked on the apartment door, hard. Mr. Rowe? We need to talk. Ethan climbed through the window first, awkwardly maneuvering Sophie through without waking her. Victoria followed, moving slower because of her injured leg. The knocking got louder. Mr. Rowe, open the door. They made it onto the fire escape just as Ethan heard the apartment door crash open, splintering wood, heavy footsteps inside. Victoria looked at him with wide eyes. Climb, Ethan mouthed. They went down instead of up. down 2 flights of rusty stairs that groaned under their weight, down to the alley behind the building where Ethan's truck was parked. Sophie stirred as they moved, her eyes fluttering open. "Daddy?" "Shh, honey, we're okay. We're just going for a drive." "Where?" "I'll tell you in a minute. Just stay quiet, okay?" Sophie nodded against his shoulder, still mostly asleep. They reached the alley. Ethan fumbled with his keys, got the truck unlocked, and practically shoved Victoria into the passenger seat. He buckled Sophie into the back, his hands shaking so badly he almost couldn't work the seatbelt. Above them, voices shouted. Someone had reached the bathroom window. Ethan jumped into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine sputtered. "Come on," he whispered. "Come on, come on." It caught. He threw the truck into reverse and peeled out of the alley just as one of the men appeared on the fire escape above them. Ethan didn't look back. He just drove, hands tight on the wheel, heart hammering in his chest. Beside him, Victoria was breathing hard. "Where are we going?" she asked. Ethan had no idea. He just drove through the dark streets of Portland, away from his home, away from the only life he knew, with a billionaire in his passenger seat and his daughter in the back, and absolutely no plan for what came next. "Daddy?" Sophie's voice was small. "Are we in trouble?" Ethan met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "No, baby. We're okay." It was the first time in his life he'd lied to his daughter. Behind them, headlights appeared. The black SUV, following. Victoria saw it at the same time Ethan did. "They're coming," she said. "I know." "What do we do?" Ethan pressed harder on the accelerator, his old truck protesting as the speedometer climbed. The SUV kept pace easily. "Hold on," he said. Then he took a hard right into a residential neighborhood, tires squealing. The SUV followed. Ethan took another turn, then another, weaving through streets he knew by heart, from years of living in this part of the city. The SUV was faster, better. But Ethan knew these roads. He took a sharp left into an alley barely wide enough for his truck. The SUV tried to follow and clipped the corner of a dumpster, sparks flying. It slowed them down just enough. Ethan burst out the other side of the alley and kept driving. 5 minutes later, when he was sure they'd lost the tail, he pulled into a 24-hour grocery store parking lot and killed the engine. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the steering wheel. "Everyone okay?" he asked. "I'm scared," Sophie said. "I know, honey. Me too." Victoria was silent. When Ethan looked at her, there were tears on her face. She wiped them away angrily, like she was mad at herself for crying. "This is my fault," she said. "All of this. I should never have—" "Stop!" Ethan's voice came out harder than he intended. "We're not doing this. Not now. Right now, we figure out where to go and how to keep Sophie safe. Everything else comes after." Victoria nodded, still crying silently. In the back seat, Sophie reached forward and touched Victoria's shoulder. "It's okay," his daughter said softly. "My daddy will fix it. He always does." Ethan wished he had his daughter's faith in him. He pulled out his phone to call Marcus. Maybe they could hide at the garage for the night, and then remembered what Daniel Garrett had said. They knew where Sophie went to school. They knew everything about him, which meant they'd know about the garage too. "We can't stay in Portland," Ethan said. "They'll find us." "Where do we go?" Ethan thought about it. Thought about places Chen's people wouldn't think to look. Places off the grid. "I have a friend," he said slowly. "From before. Before Sophie, before everything. He lives about 2 hours outside the city. Has a cabin on some property. No neighbors. No one would think to look there." "Will he let us stay?" "If I ask, yeah. He owes me." Victoria wiped her face. "Then we go there. Tonight. And tomorrow I end this." "How?" "That board meeting is at 10 a.m. in New York. If I can get there, if I can walk into that room with the evidence Jennifer found, I can destroy Chen in front of everyone. The board, the investors, the media. You'll never make it to New York. They'll be watching airports. Then I find another way." Ethan looked at her. At this woman who'd been running her whole life and was tired of running. Who'd lost everything but refused to stay lost. "Okay," he said. "We get you to New York, but after that you disappear. For real this time. You take whatever evidence you have, you destroy Chen, and then you get as far away from me and Sophie as possible. Deal?" Victoria met his eyes. Deal. Ethan started the truck again and pulled out of the parking lot, heading for the highway. Sophie fell back asleep in the back. Victoria stared out the window at the passing lights, and neither of them mentioned that the deal they'd just made meant saying goodbye. Not yet. Not until they had to. The cabin belonged to a man named Ray Hutchins, and Ethan hadn't spoken to him in 4 years. They'd served together briefly. Not military, but close enough. Wildfire crews in Oregon during the bad summers when half the state burned and teenagers with shovels were all that stood between small towns and total destruction. Ray had saved Ethan's life once when a fire jumped containment lines and trapped them on the wrong side of a ridge. Ethan had returned the favor 2 weeks later when Ray's leg got pinned under a fallen tree. After that season ended, they'd stayed in touch for a while. Then life happened. Sophie was born. Ray moved further into the woods. The calls got less frequent until they stopped entirely. But Ethan still had his number. He pulled over at a rest stop 40 minutes outside Portland and called while Victoria tried to coax Sophie back to sleep in the truck bed. Ray answered on the 5th ring, voice thick with sleep or whiskey or both. Yeah? Ray, it's Ethan Rowe. Silence. Then, Ethan? Jesus. What time is it? Late. Listen, I need a favor. What kind of favor? Ethan looked back at his truck, at Victoria's silhouette through the rear window, at his daughter curled up in blankets. The kind where you don't ask questions, and I don't tell you things that'll get you in trouble. More silence. Ray had always been sharp. He knew what that meant. How much trouble are we talking? Enough that I wouldn't ask if I had anywhere else to go. Ray breathed out slowly. You got Sophie with you? Yeah. She okay? For now. Then get your ass up here. You remember how to find the place? I remember. Gate code's still your birthday. Don't wake me up when you arrive. Ray paused. And Ethan, whatever this is, it better not burn down my cabin. I'll do my best. The line went dead. Ethan climbed back into the truck where Victoria was watching him with tired eyes. He said yes? He said yes. They drove the rest of the way in near silence, following 2-lane highways that cut through dense forest. Sophie slept. Victoria stared out the window. And Ethan tried not to think about how completely his life had derailed in less than 72 hours. Ray's property was exactly as Ethan remembered. 15 acres of pine trees and overgrown trails with a cabin that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and stubbornness. Solar panels on the roof, a generator in a shed, the kind of place where someone could disappear if they wanted to. The gate code still worked. Ethan pulled up to the cabin and killed the engine. We're here, he said quietly. Victoria looked at the structure with something like disbelief. This is where we're hiding. This is where no one will find us. It doesn't have walls. It has walls. They're just rustic. That's not what rustic means. Despite everything, Ethan smiled. Come on, let's get inside before Sophie freezes. Ray had left the front door unlocked like he'd promised. The interior was small but functional. One main room with a wood stove, a kitchenette that looked barely used, and 2 bedrooms barely bigger than closets. It smelled like pine and old coffee, and the particular kind of quiet that only existed far from cities. Ethan carried Sophie to one of the bedrooms and tucked her into the narrow bed. She didn't wake up. Kids could sleep through anything when they felt safe, and somehow she still felt safe with him, even though he'd just dragged her into something that might get them all killed. When he came back out, Victoria was standing by the wood stove trying to figure out how it worked. There's kindling in the box, Ethan said, moving past her, and matches on the shelf. He got a fire going while Victoria watched. The flames caught slowly, reluctantly, but eventually they took. Heat started spreading through the small space. You should sleep, Ethan said. It's almost 3 in the morning. I can't. Victoria sat down heavily on the worn couch. Every time I close my eyes, I see the crash. The men shooting. The way Daniel Garrett's voice sounded when he threatened your daughter. Ethan sat beside her, keeping a careful distance. You did everything you could. I dragged you into this. I pulled you out of a wrecked car. That was my choice. A stupid choice. Maybe, but it's done now. Ethan leaned back, exhaustion pulling at him. So today, I guess, what's the plan? How do you get from here to New York by 10 in the morning? Victoria pulled out one of the burner phones and started typing. There's a private airstrip about an hour from here, small operation. They do charter flights for people who want to avoid commercial airports. That costs money. I still have access to some accounts Chen doesn't know about. Offshore holdings I set up years ago. She kept typing. If I can get to that airstrip and book a flight, I can be in New York by 9. That gives me an hour to prepare. And when you get there, I walk into that boardroom. I present the evidence. I watch Robert Chen's career end in real time. Victoria's voice went flat. Then I make sure he spends the rest of his life in prison for attempted murder and embezzlement. You sound very sure about that. I am sure. I've been planning corporate takedowns since I was 25. This is just another hostile acquisition. Except the asset I'm acquiring is my own life back. Ethan studied her profile in the firelight. The bruises were fading but still visible. The cut on her forehead was healing but would definitely scar. She looked tired and determined and absolutely unwilling to bend. What happens after? He asked. After you destroy Chen and take back your company. What then? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I disappear, like I promised. I'll set up a new CEO to run things. Someone I trust. Someone who won't try to kill me. And then I walk away. To where? I don't know yet. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere nobody knows my name. She glanced at him. Somewhere I can figure out who I am without the company. You think you'll miss it? I think I've been Victoria Sinclair, CEO, for so long that I don't remember how to be anything else. The fire crackled. Outside, wind moved through the trees with a sound like distant conversation. For what it's worth, Ethan said, I think you'd be okay. Without the company. You're tougher than you think. Victoria's laugh was soft and sad. You've known me 3 days. Long enough to see you survive a murder attempt, plan a corporate coup from a stranger's couch, and read bedtime stories to an 8-year-old like you've been doing it your whole life. Ethan met her eyes. Yeah, I think you'd be okay. Something shifted in Victoria's expression, something vulnerable that she quickly tried to hide. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything, for saving me, for protecting Sophie, for not treating me like a business deal. You're welcome. They sat there in silence for a while, both too wired to sleep despite the exhaustion. Eventually, Victoria leaned against his shoulder without seeming to realize she was doing it. Ethan didn't move. Just let her rest there while the fire burned down and dawn started creeping through the windows. He must have dozed off at some point because he woke to Sophie's voice and morning light streaming through the cabin. Daddy, where are we? Victoria was already awake, sitting upright, putting distance between them like she'd been caught doing something wrong. Ethan rubbed his face and tried to shake off the grogginess. We're at my friend Ray's cabin, honey, remember? I told you we were going on a little trip. Sophie looked around with wide eyes. It smells weird. That's just the woods. Are those deer? Sophie had moved to the window, pointing at something outside. Ethan joined her. Sure enough, 3 deer were grazing near the tree line, unbothered by the cabin's presence. Yeah, pretty cool, right? Can I go see them? Not right now, but maybe later. Sophie seemed satisfied with that answer. She wandered into the kitchen area, poking through Ray's sparse cabinets. Do we have breakfast? I'll figure something out. Ray had left basics. Coffee, canned soup, some stale crackers. Not exactly kid-friendly options. Ethan made a mental note to drive into whatever town was nearby and get real food. Assuming they had time. Assuming Victoria's plan worked. Victoria had the burner phone out again, making arrangements for the charter flight. Her voice had shifted back into business mode. Crisp, efficient, commanding. The woman who'd fallen asleep against his shoulder was gone, replaced by the Ice Queen making deals. Confirmed, she said after hanging up. Flight leaves at 7. Gets into a private strip in New Jersey at 8:45 local time. From there, it's a 30-minute drive into Manhattan. Cutting it close. That's the only flight available. Ethan checked his watch. 6:15. We need to leave soon then. You're not coming. He turned to look at her. What? You and Sophie stay here. Where it's safe. I'll go alone. That's not happening. Ethan, you think Chen's people aren't watching that airstrip? You think you can just waltz onto a plane without them knowing? Ethan crossed his arms. You need backup, even if it's just someone driving you there and making sure you actually get on the plane. And if they follow us, if they find Sophie, then I deal with it. But I'm not letting you do this alone. They stared at each other, neither willing to back down. Finally, Victoria looked away. Fine, but Sophie stays here. Sophie comes with us. That's insane. Ray's in town getting supplies. The cabin's empty. You think I'm leaving my daughter alone in the middle of nowhere? Ethan's voice rose slightly. She stays with me. End of discussion. Victoria opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She must have seen something in his expression that told her this wasn't negotiable. All right, Reset, she said. We all go. But if anything happens, nothing's going to happen. It was the second lie he'd told in 2 days. He was getting better at it. They left 20 minutes later, Ethan's truck rattling down the dirt road toward the highway. Sophie sat in the back eating stale crackers and humming to herself, blissfully unaware of the tension in the front seat. The drive to the airstrip took 50 minutes through increasingly rural landscape. Victoria spent most of it on the phone, making more arrangements, calling in favors from people Ethan had never heard of. He got the sense she was orchestrating something bigger than just showing up at a board meeting. She was preparing for war. The airstrip appeared suddenly. Just a long stretch of cracked pavement with a single hangar and a small office building that looked abandoned. 2 planes sat on the tarmac, both small, both expensive looking. Ethan pulled up near the hangar and cut the engine. That's your ride? He asked, nodding at the closer plane. Should be. They climbed out. The morning air was cold and sharp, smelling like aviation fuel and cut grass. A man in a leather jacket emerged from the hangar, walking toward them with the casual confidence of someone who'd flown planes in sketchy situations before. You Victoria? He called out. I am. We're fueled and ready. Should be in New Jersey by 9, give or take. The pilot looked at Ethan and Sophie. You didn't mention passengers. They're not coming, Victoria said quickly. Yes, we are, Sophie piped up. Daddy said. The pilot raised an eyebrow at Ethan, who shrugged. Long story. Yeah, well, it's your dime. The pilot checked his watch. We leave in 5. I don't wait for anyone. He headed back toward the plane. Victoria turned to Ethan, her expression somewhere between frustrated and scared. You should stay here, she said again. Please. Not happening. Ethan, listen to me. He grabbed her shoulders gently, making her meet his eyes. You're about to walk into a room full of people who want you dead or gone. You're going to accuse your CFO of attempted murder in front of investors and cameras. That's not something you do alone. That's not something anyone should have to do alone. I've been alone my whole life. Yeah, I know. That's the problem. Well, Victoria's eyes were bright with something that might have been tears, but she blinked them away and straightened her shoulders. Okay, she said. Okay, you win. They boarded the plane, a 6-seater that smelled like old leather and mechanical oil. Sophie was thrilled, pressing her face against the window and asking the pilot 100 questions he mostly ignored. Victoria sat rigid in her seat, hands gripping the armrests. You afraid of flying? Ethan asked. No, I'm afraid of crashing. We're not going to crash. That's what I thought 3 days ago. The pilot fired up the engines and they taxied onto the runway. The plane shuddered and rattled in a way that didn't seem entirely safe, but the pilot didn't look concerned. They picked up speed, the trees at the end of the runway getting closer and closer until suddenly they weren't and the ground fell away beneath them. Sophie squealed with delight. Victoria went even more pale. Ethan reached over and took her hand without thinking about it. She gripped his fingers so hard it hurt, but he didn't pull away. They flew east into the rising sun. The flight took just under 3 hours with a headwind. Victoria spent most of it going over the evidence Jennifer had sent, organizing it on her phone, rehearsing what she'd say. Ethan watched her work, fascinated by the transformation. This was her element. This was where the Ice Queen lived. Around 9, the pilot's voice crackled through the cabin speakers. Starting descent. We'll be on the ground in 10. New Jersey appeared below them. Industrial parks and highways, and then the small private airstrip the pilot had mentioned. They landed hard, the plane bouncing once before settling. Sophie thought it was hilarious. Victoria looked like she might be sick. A car was waiting when they deplaned, a black sedan with a driver Victoria must have arranged. He didn't ask questions, just held the door open while they climbed in. Sinclair Technologies headquarters, Victoria told him. Manhattan, as fast as you can without getting pulled over. The driver nodded and pulled away from the airstrip. Traffic was brutal. Of course it was. It was New York on a weekday morning. They crawled through tunnels and past skyscrapers while Victoria checked her phone obsessively. 9:30, 9:40, 9:50. We're not going to make it, she said, voice tight with panic. Yes, we are, Ethan said. Just breathe. If I'm not there by 10, they vote. If they vote, I lose. Then we'll be there by 10. The driver must have sensed the urgency because he started taking risks, cutting through yellow lights, weaving between lanes, ignoring honking horns. Sophie thought that was fun too. Ethan held onto the door handle and prayed they didn't die in a traffic accident after surviving everything else. At 9:58, the building appeared. Sinclair Technologies headquarters, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that probably cost more than Ethan would make in 10 lifetimes. The driver pulled up to the front entrance and Victoria practically fell out of the car. Stay here, she told Ethan. Both of you. I'll come back when it's done. Victoria! But she was already gone, running toward the entrance in clothes she'd borrowed from Ethan's closet, looking nothing like the polished CEO the world expected. She looked human, desperate, real. Ethan watched her disappear through the revolving doors and realized he'd never asked what would happen if she failed. Inside the car, Sophie tugged on his sleeve. Is Victoria going to be okay, Daddy? Ethan didn't know how to answer that, so he just pulled his daughter close and stared at the building and waited. Victoria showed her ID to security, and the guard nearly dropped his tablet. Ms. Sinclair, but you're late. Where's the board meeting? 23rd floor, conference room A. But ma'am, we were told you were... Victoria didn't wait to hear the rest. She headed for the elevators, her injured leg screaming in protest, but she ignored it. She'd ignored worse. The elevator took forever. Other employees got on at various floors, all of them doing double takes when they recognized her. Whispers followed. Stares. She ignored those too. 23rd floor. The conference room doors were closed, but she could hear voices inside. She checked her phone. 10:02. She was late, but not too late. Victoria straightened her borrowed flannel shirt, pushed her hair back, and walked in. The room went silent. 12 board members sat around a massive table. Robert Chen stood at the head, mid-presentation, his face going from confident to shocked to furious in the space of a heartbeat. Investors lined the walls. Cameras from financial news networks were set up in the back. Everyone stared at her. Hello, Robert, Victoria said calmly. Sorry I'm late. Someone tried to murder me and it threw off my schedule. Chen recovered quickly, his expression smoothing into something practiced and concerned. Victoria, my God, we thought you were dead. Where have you been? Surviving, which is more than you wanted. Murmurs rippled through the room. The cameras shifted to focus on her. I don't know what you're talking about, Chen said carefully. We've been worried sick. We've had search teams. You had assassins. Victoria pulled out her phone. Should I play the recordings? The ones where you and Daniel Garrett discuss the best way to make my death look like an accident? Or should I start with the bank statements showing how you've been embezzling from this company for the last 8 months? The color drained from Chen's face. That's absurd. You're clearly traumatized. You need medical attention. What I need, Victoria interrupted, her voice cutting through the room like a blade, is for everyone here to see exactly what kind of man is about to become CEO. She connected her phone to the conference room display. Emails appeared, financial records, security footage of Chen meeting with Garrett, audio recordings of them planning the accident, discussing how to frame it, how to eliminate the problem of Victoria Sinclair permanently. The room erupted, board members shouting, investors demanding explanations, reporters surging forward with cameras and microphones. And through it all, Victoria stood at the head of the table looking directly at Robert Chen with cold, absolute certainty. You tried to kill me, she said quietly. You failed, and now I'm going to take everything from you. Chen lunged toward her, rage finally breaking through his composed exterior. Two security guards appeared from nowhere, grabbing his arms before he could reach her. He fought against them, screaming, "You can't do this. You can't just—" "I already did." Police arrived within minutes. Someone must have called them the moment Victoria started presenting evidence. They handcuffed Chen right there in front of everyone. The board, the investors, the cameras broadcasting this disaster to the entire business world. As they led him away, Chen twisted back to look at Victoria. "This isn't over," he snarled. "Yes," Victoria said tiredly. "It is." When the conference room finally cleared, police and reporters and shocked board members all filtering out, Victoria stood alone at the window looking down at the city she'd built her empire in. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "We saw the news." "You did it? Get out of there, now." It was from Ethan. She'd forgotten he was waiting outside. Forgotten Sophie was in the car. Forgotten that somewhere beyond this building was a life that had nothing to do with hostile takeovers and corporate warfare. Victoria took the elevator down and walked out through the front entrance where Ethan's beat-up truck looked wildly out of place among the luxury cars and town cars. He was leaning against the driver's side door, Sophie sitting on the hood, eating what looked like a hot dog from a street vendor. When Victoria approached, Ethan straightened. "So?" he asked. "How'd it go?" Victoria felt something break loose in her chest. A laugh bubbled up, exhausted and slightly hysterical, but real. "I destroyed him," she said. "Completely." Sophie jumped off the hood and threw her arms around Victoria's waist. "You were so brave," his daughter said. "We watched you on Daddy's phone. You were like a superhero." Victoria looked down at the little girl hugging her, then up at Ethan, who was watching them both with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What now?" he asked. Victoria didn't know. For the first time in her adult life, she had no plan. No next move, no strategy. "Now," she said slowly, "I guess I figure out what comes next." Ethan nodded. "We should probably get out of here before the reporters find you." They climbed back into the truck, Victoria in the passenger seat, Sophie chattering excitedly in the back about how cool everything had been. Ethan started the engine and pulled away from the building. As Manhattan disappeared in the rearview mirror, Victoria realized she wasn't thinking about her company or her board or what would happen to Sinclair Technologies now that Robert Chen was in custody. She was thinking about a little apartment in Portland with water-stained ceilings and a garage that barely survived month to month, and a man who'd saved her life without expecting anything in return. And she was thinking that maybe, for the first time ever, she didn't want to disappear. They made it back to Ray's cabin by midnight, Sophie asleep in the back seat again, and Victoria staring at her phone like it might explode. It had been ringing non-stop since they left Manhattan. Lawyers, board members, reporters. Every major news outlet wanted an interview with the dead CEO who'd risen from the grave to destroy her would-be murderer on live television. Victoria had ignored them all. Ethan carried Sophie inside while Victoria stood in the driveway, finally answering one of the calls. He could hear her voice through the open door, cold, professional, deflecting questions with practiced ease. When she came in 10 minutes later, she looked exhausted. "That was my lawyer," she said. "The board wants an emergency session tomorrow. They want me to formally resume my position as CEO." "Isn't that what you wanted?" "I don't know anymore, shots." Ethan got the fire going while Victoria collapsed onto the couch. The cabin felt smaller with her in it now, like her presence took up more space than her body actually occupied. Or maybe he was just more aware of her, of the way she moved, the way she breathed. "You should eat something," he said. "You haven't eaten since this morning." "I'm not hungry." "Victoria, I'm fine, Ethan. I've gone longer without food building my company. I can handle one day, sub." But her hands were shaking when she said it. Ethan ignored her protest and heated up some of Ray's canned soup on the stove. He brought her a bowl without asking if she wanted it, just set it on the table in front of her and waited. Victoria looked at the soup, looked at him, then picked up the spoon. "Thank you," she said quietly. They ate in silence for a while, the only sound the crackling fire and the wind outside. When Victoria finished, she set the bowl down and finally met his eyes. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Okay." "The board wants me back. My lawyers are drawing up new security protocols. I could have my company, my life, everything back within a week." She paused. "But I'd have to return to New York permanently." Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. That makes sense. Does it? You're Victoria Sinclair. You run a tech empire. Of course you have to go back. What if I don't want to? The words hung between them like a confession. Ethan stared at her, trying to understand what she was saying, what she was asking. What are you talking about? Victoria stood up and started pacing, that nervous energy back in full force. I spent 10 years building that company, 10 years working 18-hour days and sacrificing everything for growth and market share and shareholder value. And you know what I realized sitting in that boardroom today? What? I hated every second of it. Her voice cracked slightly. I was good at it. I was great at it. But I hated it. The politics, the constant fighting, the way everyone wanted something from me and nobody actually cared if I lived or died as long as the quarterly reports looked good. Victoria, eh? Do you know the first time in 10 years I felt like a human being? She stopped pacing and looked at him directly. When Sophie held my hand and asked me to read her a story, when you made me terrible coffee in your terrible apartment and didn't expect anything in return, when I watched you carry your daughter up 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken and you didn't complain once. Ethan's throat felt tight. You're tired. You've been through hell. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years. You can't just walk away from your company. Why not? I own 51%. I can do whatever I want. Because it's who you are. It's what you built. No. Victoria shook her head. It's what I hid behind. There's a difference. Before Ethan could respond, his phone rang. He almost didn't answer, but the caller ID showed Marcus's name, and Marcus never called this late unless something was wrong. Hey, what's... Ethan, where are you? Marcus's voice was tight with something that sounded like fear. I'm out of town. Why? What happened? Someone torched your apartment 3 hours ago. The whole building's gone. The words didn't make sense at first. Ethan heard them, but couldn't process them, like they were in a language he didn't quite speak. What? Your building. Someone set a fire, started in your unit and spread to the whole structure. Mrs. Chen got out. Most people got out, but Ethan, Marcus's voice broke. They're saying it was arson. They're saying someone was looking for you. Ethan's legs gave out, and he sat down hard on the couch. Victoria was beside him immediately, her hand on his arm. Is anyone hurt? Ethan managed to ask. 2 people in the ICU from smoke inhalation. Everyone else is okay, but your place, everything you had, it's gone, man. I'm so sorry. Ethan thought about his apartment, the couch where he'd slept for 3 years, Sophie's drawings on the walls, the coffee maker Victoria couldn't figure out. All of it just gone. Where's Mrs. Chen? He asked. Staying with her daughter across town. She's asking about Sophie. Wants to know if you're both okay. We're fine. Tell her we're safe. Where are you? I can't tell you that, not yet. Marcus was quiet for a moment. This is about that woman, isn't it? The one from the news. The billionaire CEO. Ethan glanced at Victoria, who was watching him with wide, stricken eyes. Yeah, he said. It's about her. Jesus, Ethan, what did you get yourself into? I'm handling it. Your apartment is gone. Someone tried to kill you and everyone in your building. That's not handling it. That's... I know, but I can't come back to Portland. Not yet. Not until I know Sophie's safe. Then what are you going to do? Ethan looked at Victoria, at the guilt and horror written all across her face. I don't know yet, he said, but I'll figure it out. He hung up and sat there staring at nothing while his brain tried to catch up with what Marcus had just told him. His home was gone. Everything he owned except what was in his truck. And Chen's people had done it, had tried to burn him alive just for helping Victoria. This is my fault, Victoria whispered. All of it. No, they burned down your home, Ethan. They almost killed your neighbors. Because of me. Because of Chen. Because of people who are willing to murder anyone who gets in their way. Ethan grabbed her shoulders, making her look at him. This isn't on you. I should have left that first night. Should have found somewhere else to hide. Should have what? Died in that car? Let Chen win? Let him keep stealing and murdering and getting away with it? Ethan's voice rose. You did the right thing. You stopped him. And yeah, it cost me my apartment. But that's just a place. It's just stuff. What matters is that Sophie's safe and you're alive, and Chen is in custody. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Well, care about people. Let them matter. I spent so long building walls that I forgot what it was like to... She stopped, shaking her head. You and Sophie, you let me in like it was the easiest thing in the world. Like I wasn't this broken, damaged person who ruins everything she touches. You're not broken. Yes, I am. Yeah, okay. Then you're broken. So what? Everyone's broken. I'm broken. Sophie's broken in her own way because her mother left, and I can't give her the life she deserves. But we're here anyway. We're trying anyway. Ethan pulled Victoria closer. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be real. Victoria made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Then she leaned her forehead against his shoulder and let herself cry for the first time since this whole nightmare started. Ethan held her, feeling her shake against him, feeling the weight of everything she'd been carrying finally break loose. They stayed like that for a long time. Eventually, Victoria pulled back, wiping her face. I'm sorry, she said. For what? For falling apart on you, Seth. You just took down a corporate conspiracy and nearly got killed multiple times in the last week. I think you're allowed to fall apart a little. Victoria laughed despite herself. Is that your professional opinion? Yeah, it's in the Single Dad Handbook, page 47, right after the chapter on removing permanent marker from walls. She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes and made her look younger, less guarded. What now? She asked. Now we figure out what happens next. Together. The word surprised them both. Together. Like this was something they were both in. Something that went beyond a week of chaos and survival. Before either of them could examine that too closely, Sophie appeared in the hallway, rubbing her eyes. Daddy, I had a bad dream. Ethan immediately went to her, scooping her up even though she was getting too big for it. You're okay, honey. Just a dream. Bullshit. I dreamed our house burned down and we didn't have anywhere to go. Ethan and Victoria exchanged glances. Of course she'd had that dream. Kids picked up on things even when you tried to protect them. Our house is fine, Ethan lied, hating himself for it, but knowing she needed to hear it. We're just on a little adventure, remember? When do we go home? Soon. Sophie nodded against his shoulder, already half asleep again. Ethan carried her back to the bedroom and tucked her in, watching until her breathing evened out into sleep. When he came back to the living room, Victoria was standing by the window looking out at the dark forest. You can't go back to Portland, she said without turning around. Not to stay. They know where you live, where Sophie goes to school. They'll be watching. I know. So what's your plan? Ethan sat down heavily. I don't have one. I can't afford to move. Can't afford to start over somewhere new. Hell, I couldn't afford that apartment. And now I don't even have that. Victoria turned to face him. What if you didn't have to afford it? Don't. Don't what? Don't offer me money. Don't try to solve this by throwing cash at the problem. Why not? I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Why shouldn't I use it to help the man who saved my life? Because I don't want your charity. It's not charity. Yes, it is. Ethan stood up, frustration building. I appreciate everything. I do. But I'm not some project for you to fix. I'm not. I love you. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. He stared at Victoria, certain he'd misheard. What? I'm in love with you. Victoria's voice shook, but she didn't look away. I know it's crazy. I know it's only been a week. I know I'm probably traumatized and confused and not thinking straight. But when I was standing in that boardroom today, all I could think about was getting back to you and Sophie. Not my company. Not my reputation. You. Ethan couldn't breathe. Victoria, you don't have to say it back. I know I'm a mess. I know I've ruined your life. I know... He kissed her. It wasn't smooth or planned or anything like the movies. It was desperate and awkward and real. Victoria froze for half a second, then kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I don't know if it's love, he said honestly. I don't know you well enough yet, but I know I've spent the last week feeling more alive than I have in years. I know Sophie lights up when you walk into a room. I know when I thought about you going back to New York permanently, something in my chest hurt. So what does that mean? I think it means we're both idiots who fell for each other in the middle of a crisis, and now we have to figure out if it's real or just adrenaline. Victoria laughed. That's the most unromantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Yeah, well, I'm out of practice. They stood there in Ray's cabin with the fire burning low and Sophie asleep down the hall and the rest of their lives completely uncertain. And somehow it felt right. Like maybe broken people could find each other and build something that worked. Stay, Victoria said quietly. Here, in Oregon. Not Portland, but somewhere nearby. Let me buy you a house. Let me help you rebuild. I can't let you do that. Why not? Because what if this thing between us doesn't work? What if in 2 months you realize you made a mistake and you want to go back to your old life? Then I'm stuck in a house you bought, and you're stuck feeling guilty about it. Victoria considered this. What if we make a deal? What kind of deal? What kind of... I resign from Sinclair Technologies, officially. I install a new CEO, someone trustworthy, and I step away completely. Then I stay here. I buy a house. Not for you, for me. And you and Sophie can stay in it until you figure out what's next. If things work out between us, great. If they don't, you still have a safe place to live, and I have a house in Oregon I can use when I need to escape the world. That's a terrible deal. You're giving up everything. No, I'm finally choosing something for myself instead of for my shareholders. Victoria took his hands. I don't want my company back. I don't want to be the ice queen. I want to wake up in the morning and not immediately start calculating market projections. I want to read bedtime stories. I want to learn how to make coffee in a $20 machine. I want to figure out who Victoria Sinclair is when she's not trying to conquer the business world. And you think you can do that here? Boy? I think I want to try. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, saw the hope and fear and vulnerability she was trying so hard to show him, saw someone who'd spent her whole life being strong and was finally asking for help. Okay, he said. Okay? Yeah, but I'm paying rent, even if it's symbolic. And I'm working. I'm not living off you. That's ridiculous. That's the deal. Take it or leave it. Victoria smiled. You're very stubborn. So are you. It's probably why this will never work. Probably. They kissed again, slower this time, less desperate, more like a promise. When they pulled apart, Victoria's phone was ringing again. She glanced at the screen inside. It's my lawyer, again. You should answer. I know. She stepped away to take the call while Ethan fed more wood into the fire. He could hear her voice in the other room, firm and decisive. She was telling them no. She was actually doing it, walking away from billions of dollars because she'd rather live a small life with a mechanic and his daughter. It was insane. It was also kind of beautiful. When Victoria came back, she looked lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. I told them, she said. I'm resigning. They think I've lost my mind. Have you? Probably. They sat on the couch together, Victoria leaning against him, both of them staring at the fire and trying to process everything that had happened in the last week. What about Sophie? Victoria asked quietly. Does she know about us? She's 8. She knows something's happening even if she can't name it. And if she doesn't want me around? Misty. She asked if you were staying forever. I'm pretty sure that means she's on board. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I don't know how to be a mother. Good news. She already has a mother, terrible as she is. You don't have to be that. You just have to be you. What if I'm not enough? Ethan turned to look at her. You faced down a man who tried to murder you. You rebuilt your entire life in a week. You stood in front of cameras in the business world and told the truth, even though it would have been easier to run. Trust me, you're enough. Victoria's eyes were bright again, but this time she didn't cry. She just nodded and let herself believe it. They fell asleep on the couch together, tangled up in each other and Ray's old blankets. At some point during the night, Sophie wandered out and climbed onto the couch with them. Wedging herself between Ethan and Victoria, like she'd been doing it her whole life. When Ethan woke up at dawn, he found his daughter using Victoria's arm as a pillow and Victoria's hand resting protectively on Sophie's shoulder even in sleep. It looked like a family. It looked like home. 2 days later, they drove back toward Portland, but not all the way. Victoria had found a house about 40 minutes outside the city. Nothing fancy. Just a 3-bedroom ranch with a big yard and a garage Ethan could use as a workshop. She'd paid cash for it, waving off Ethan's protests about how expensive it was. "It's cheaper than my apartment in Manhattan was for 1 month," she'd said. "This is practically a bargain." But they pulled up to the house on a gray afternoon, rain starting to fall in that persistent Oregon way. Sophie pressed her face to the window, eyes wide. "This is ours?" "This is ours," Victoria confirmed. "It's huge. It's got 4 walls and a roof. That makes it a house." Sophie was out of the truck before Ethan could even put it in park, running through the rain to explore the yard. Ethan and Victoria followed more slowly, both carrying boxes of the few belongings they'd managed to salvage and buy. Inside, the house was empty, but clean. Hardwood floors, big windows, a kitchen that actually had counter space. It smelled like fresh paint and possibility. "You really did it," Ethan said, looking around. "You actually walked away from everything." "Not everything." Victoria slipped her hand into his. "I kept what mattered." They spent the rest of the day unpacking and setting up furniture Victoria had ordered online. It wasn't much. Beds, a couch, a kitchen table. But it was enough. Sophie claimed the bedroom with the best light and immediately started decorating it with her surviving drawings and stuffed animals. That night, after Sophie went to bed, Ethan and Victoria sat on the back porch watching the rain. "Marcus called," Ethan said. "He wants me back at the garage. Says he's got more work than he can handle." "That's good." "Yeah. And I've been thinking, maybe I start taking night classes. Get certified in some of the newer motorcycle systems. Build the business back up properly this time." Victoria smiled. "That sounds like a plan." "What about you? What are you going to do?" "Yay. I have some ideas. Jennifer and I have been talking about starting a nonprofit, using my resources to fund education programs, small business grants, that kind of thing." She shrugged. "Turns out dismantling corporate America from the inside is pretty fulfilling. You're going to be bored in 6 months. Maybe, but at least I'll be bored with people I actually care about." Ethan pulled her closer. "This is crazy, you know. All of it." "I know. We barely know each other, Sit. I know that too. And Sophie's going to have opinions about everything, and your money's going to be weird, and my work hours are terrible, and—" Victoria kissed him, shutting him up effectively. "Stop overthinking," she said when they broke apart. "We'll figure it out." "Just like that?" Just like that. It wasn't a perfect solution. They'd have problems. They'd argue. They'd figure out that loving someone was harder than saving them from a car wreck. But sitting there in the rain with Sophie safe inside in a future that was completely uncertain, but finally theirs to choose, it felt like enough. More than enough. It felt like home. 6 months passed like water finding its level. The first month was the hardest. Ethan worked 12-hour days at the garage trying to rebuild his savings, while Victoria navigated the strange territory of not working at all. She'd wake up at 5 in the morning out of habit, reach for her phone to check the markets, then remember she didn't have to anymore. The adjustment was brutal. She paced. She reorganized the kitchen 3 times. She drove Ethan slightly crazy with her need to optimize everything. But she also learned to cook. Badly at first. There was an incident with smoke alarms and what was supposed to be lasagna. But she learned. She picked Sophie up from her new school every day, helped with homework, sat through parent-teacher conferences where the teacher praised Sophie's progress, and Victoria felt absurdly proud, even though she'd only been in the girl's life for weeks. And slowly, the pacing stopped. The compulsive phone checking faded. Victoria started sleeping past 6. By month 2, the house actually felt lived in. Sophie's artwork covered the fridge. Ethan's tools migrated from the garage into the mudroom despite Victoria's protests. They developed routines. Sunday breakfast together, Wednesday movie nights, Friday takeout because nobody wanted to cook. They fought, of course. About money, mostly. Ethan hated that Victoria paid for everything despite his insistence on contributing. Victoria hated that Ethan worked himself to exhaustion trying to prove he could support them. They'd argue, storm off, then come back and figure it out because walking away wasn't an option anymore. The media attention died down by month 3. Robert Chen's trial dominated headlines for a while. The disgraced CFO trying and failing to cut a deal, the evidence too overwhelming to deny. He got 15 years for embezzlement and attempted murder. Daniel Garrett, the security chief, got 12. Victoria didn't attend the sentencing. She'd said what she needed to say already. Sinclair Technologies appointed a new CEO, a woman named Patricia Ross, who Victoria had mentored years ago. The company's stock dipped initially when Victoria officially resigned, but Patricia steadied things quickly. She was competent, ruthless when needed. She didn't need Victoria looking over her shoulder. Victoria watched the company she'd built from a distance and felt nothing but relief. By month 4, Jennifer Park's nonprofit was actually functioning. They'd set up offices in Portland, hired a small team, started reviewing grant applications from small businesses and students who needed funding. Victoria threw herself into it with the same intensity she'd once reserved for hostile takeovers, except now she was building things up instead of tearing them down. Ethan teased her about it. You know nonprofits aren't supposed to make money, right? We're not making money. We're redistributing it efficiently. You just optimize the grant approval process to run like a corporate merger. Your point? He'd laughed and kissed her and told her she was impossible. She'd agreed. Sophie turned 9 in month 5. They threw her a party in the backyard. Just a few kids from school, cake that Victoria actually managed not to burn, and presents that weren't expensive but were thoughtful. Sophie had blown out the candles and looked at Victoria and Ethan sitting together at the picnic table and said, "This is the best birthday ever." Later that night, after the kids went home and Sophie was asleep, Victoria had cried on the back porch. Happy tears this time. The kind that came from realizing you'd stumbled into something you didn't know you were looking for. Now, at month 6, Ethan stood in his garage, his real garage this time, the one attached to the house, putting finishing touches on a custom Harley he'd been building for weeks. The client was picking it up tomorrow and paying enough that Ethan could finally start contributing real money to the household expenses. He heard the door open behind him and knew without looking that it was Victoria. "You're going to work yourself to death," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "Says the woman who was up at midnight reviewing grant applications." "That's different." "How?" "Mine is sitting at a desk. Yours involves heavy machinery and the constant risk of dropping something on your foot." Ethan straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. "I'm almost done." Victoria walked over, studying the motorcycle with appreciation. She'd learned a lot in 6 months about bikes and engines and why vintage Triumphs were superior to modern Hondas according to Ethan's very specific opinions. "It's beautiful," she said. "Yeah, should be. Put enough hours into it." "How much are they paying you?" "Enough." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "That's not an answer." Because if I tell you, you'll do that thing where you calculate whether it was worth my time and tell me I should charge more. I would never... Victoria. She smiled. "Fine. Maybe I would. But only because you undervalue your work. And you overvalue everything. That's what made me rich. And miserable." "Fair point." They stood there in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Victoria pulled something from her pocket. An envelope. "What's that?" Ethan asked. "Open it." Inside was a letter, official looking, from the Portland School District. Ethan skimmed it once, then again, his brain trying to catch up with what he was reading. They're offering Sophie a spot in that gifted program? The one we couldn't afford. "They are," Victoria said carefully, "because I may have made a donation to their scholarship fund, which coincidentally covered exactly one student's tuition, who also coincidentally happens to be named Sophie Rowe." Ethan looked up at her. "Victoria, don't. Don't tell me you can't accept it. Don't tell me it's charity. It's an investment in a brilliant kid who deserves every opportunity." Victoria's voice softened. "Please, let me do this." Ooh. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to insist he'd find a way to pay for it himself. But looking at Victoria's face, at the hope and stubbornness there, he realized something. Letting her help wasn't weakness. It was partnership. It was admitting that maybe, just maybe, they were stronger together than apart. "Okay," he said. Thank you. Victoria's whole face lit up. Really? No argument? I'm learning. That's terrifying. He pulled her close and kissed her, oil-stained hands and all. She didn't seem to mind. When they broke apart, Victoria rested her forehead against his. I love you. I know I've said it before, but I don't think I say it enough. I love you and Sophie and this weird little life we're building. I love that you leave tools everywhere, and that Sophie talks through entire movies, and that the house is always slightly messy. I love all of it. Even the part where I'm stubborn about money. Especially that part. Ethan smiled. I love you too, even though you reorganize my garage when you think I'm not looking. It was chaos in here. It was organized chaos. There's no such thing. They argued about garage organization all the way back into the house where Sophie was supposedly doing homework but was actually drawing again. She looked up when they walked in, pencil poised over paper. Are you guys fighting? She asked. Yes, Ethan said. No, Victoria said at the same time. Sophie grinned. You're definitely fighting. We're discussing, Victoria corrected. That's what grown-ups call fighting. Ethan laughed and ruffled his daughter's hair. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just didn't notice because you were busy working all the time. Ouch! Sophie shrugged, unbothered. Can Victoria help me with my math homework? You're bad at fractions. I'm not bad at fractions. Sophie, you are absolutely bad at fractions, Victoria said, already moving toward the table. Show me what you're working on, Sophie. Ethan watched them huddle over the worksheet together, Victoria explaining something about common denominators, while Sophie listened intently. 6 months ago, this would have seemed impossible. A billionaire CEO tutoring his daughter in math, living in his house, part of his family. But somehow it worked. Somehow all the broken pieces had arranged themselves into something that looked almost whole. His phone rang. Marcus. Ethan stepped outside to answer. Hey. Hey yourself. You finished that Harley? Just about. Why? Because I've got 3 more clients asking specifically for you. Word's getting around. Ethan Rowe builds bikes that actually run. That seems like a low bar. You'd be surprised. Marcus paused. Listen, I've been thinking, what if we made it official? You come back as a partner. Rowe and Webb Custom Motors. 50-50 split on profits. Ethan's chest tightened. Marcus, I can't afford to buy back in. I'm not asking you to buy back in. I'm asking you to be a partner because this business was always yours and I was just keeping it warm. Marcus's voice was firm. You built the reputation. You brought in half of these clients. You deserve your name on the sign, so what do you say? Ethan looked back at the house, at the lights in the windows, at Victoria and Sophie visible through the glass, laughing about something. Yeah, he said. Yeah, okay, let's do it. Good. Now finish that Harley so we can get paid. Marcus hung up, and Ethan stood there on the porch for a moment, letting it sink in. Partner. His business back. His name on the sign. 6 months ago, he'd lost everything. Now, he had more than he'd started with. When he went back inside, Victoria took one look at his face and knew something had changed. What happened? Marcus just offered me a partnership, 50-50. My name back on the garage. Victoria's smile was immediate and genuine. That's incredible. Yeah, it is. Ethan sat down at the table with them. Feels like things are finally coming together, you know? Like maybe we actually figured it out. Figured what out? Sophie asked, looking up from her homework. Life, kiddo. We figured out life. That's stupid. Nobody figures out life. When did you get so cynical? I'm not cynical. I'm realistic. Miss Martinez says there's a difference. Victoria laughed. I like Ms. Martinez. She's my favorite teacher. Can she come to dinner sometime? We'll ask her. They finished homework together, then made dinner together. Spaghetti, because it was easy, and Sophie would actually eat it. They sat around the table talking about their days like normal families did. Sophie told them about a boy in her class who thought he was funny but wasn't. Victoria told them about a grant application from a teenager trying to start a coding school. Ethan told them about Marcus's offer, and Sophie cheered so loud the neighbors probably heard. After dinner, Sophie asked Victoria to read to her again. It had become their thing over the last few months. Every night before bed, Victoria would sit in Sophie's room and read whatever book they were working through. Currently, it was something about dragons and magical swords that Ethan couldn't keep track of. He cleaned up the kitchen while their voices drifted down the hallway. Victoria doing different voices for different characters, just like Sophie had asked that first night in the old apartment that didn't exist anymore. When Victoria came back out 20 minutes later, she looked tired but content. "She wants you to say goodnight," Victoria said. Ethan dried his hands and headed to Sophie's room. His daughter was tucked in, surrounded by stuffed animals and books. "Hey, kiddo." Hey, Daddy," Sophie yawned. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Is Victoria going to stay forever?" Ethan sat on the edge of her bed. "Would you want her to?" Sophie thought about it seriously. "Yeah, I think so. She's kind of weird sometimes, and she makes breakfast wrong. But she helps with homework, and she listens when I talk, and she doesn't treat me like I'm stupid." "You're definitely not stupid." I know, but some grown-ups forget that." Sophie picked at her blanket. "I know she's not my mom. I know Mom is out there somewhere, even if she doesn't call. But maybe Victoria could be like, I don't know, something else, something different." Ethan's throat felt tight. "What do you want to call her?" "I don't know yet. Can I think about it?" "Take all the time you need." Sophie nodded, satisfied. "Okay. Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, Sophie." He kissed her forehead and turned off the light, leaving the door cracked like she preferred. When he got back to the living room, Victoria was curled up on the couch with a book. "She okay?" Victoria asked. "She asked if you were staying forever." Victoria's hand stilled on her book. "What did you tell her?" "I asked what she wanted." "And?" "She wants you to stay, but on her terms. She's still figuring out what that means." Victoria set the book down. "I can live with that." Ethan sat beside her, pulling her close. They stayed like that for a while, just breathing together, existing in the same space without needing to fill it with words. "I never thought I'd have this," Victoria said eventually. "A home, a family. Someone who looks at me and sees Victoria instead of the Ice Queen or a dollar sign or a business opportunity. You never wanted it before." "I never thought I deserved it before." Ethan tilted her chin up so she was looking at him. "You deserve it. You've always deserved it. You just had to stop running long enough to find it. I'm glad I crashed my car near the docks." "That's a weird thing to be glad about." "You know what I mean." He did. He absolutely did. 3 months later, on a Saturday afternoon when the rain finally stopped and the sun came out, they rebuilt Ethan's old garage. Not literally the one that had burned down. That building was gone. The lot sold to developers who were putting up condos. But they found a space near Marcus's shop, small, affordable with Victoria's help, even though Ethan insisted on a loan agreement with interest. They signed papers, hired contractors, planned it together. The sign went up on a Tuesday. Rowe and Webb Custom Motors. Ethan stood in the parking lot staring at it, Victoria beside him and Sophie bouncing excitedly. "It's perfect," Sophie declared. "It's crooked," Ethan said. "It's perfect and crooked," Victoria amended, "like everything in our life." Marcus came out of the main shop grinning. "Not bad, huh? Though I still think we should have gone bigger." "This is plenty," Ethan said. "I don't need bigger, I just need enough." That night they celebrated with cheap champagne for the adults and sparkling cider for Sophie. They sat in the backyard of the house Victoria had bought and Ethan had slowly accepted as home, watching the sunset turn the sky orange and purple. "Can I say something?" Sophie asked. "Of course," Victoria said. "I think I figured out what to call you." Sophie looked at Victoria seriously. "Not Mom. That's someone else. But maybe just Vic? Is that okay?" Victoria's eyes immediately filled with tears, but she smiled through them. "That's more than okay." "Good. Because Miss Sinclair is too long and Victoria is too fancy for every day." "Vic it is, then." Sophie seemed satisfied with this arrangement and went back to her sparkling cider. Ethan reached over and squeezed Victoria's hand. She squeezed back. Later, after Sophie went to bed, Ethan and Victoria stayed outside under the stars. "You know what I realized today?" Victoria said. "What?" "A year ago, I was miserable. Completely, utterly miserable. I had more money than most people will see in their lifetimes. I had power. I had success. And I was so empty inside I couldn't even feel it anymore. And now? Now I have a house I didn't design, a kid who isn't biologically mine, a partner who argues with me about accepting help, a nonprofit that'll never make me rich, and I've never been happier. Ethan pulled her closer. That's because you finally figured out the secret. What secret? That life isn't about building empires, it's about building something real, something that matters when the money's gone and the success fades, and all you have left is the people who chose to stay. Victoria rested her head on his shoulder. When did you get so wise? Probably around the time I pulled a bleeding billionaire out of a wrecked car and decided to ruin my life helping her. You didn't ruin your life. No, I rebuilt it. We rebuilt it. They sat there until the stars came out fully, until the night air got cold enough that they had to go inside. Victoria checked on Sophie one more time before bed, standing in the doorway watching the girl sleep. I'm scared sometimes, Victoria admitted quietly. Scared I'll wake up and this will all be gone. That it was too good to be true. Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind. It's not going anywhere. This is real. We're real. Promise? Promise. And he meant it, because this wasn't a fairy tale. This wasn't a story where the poor mechanic and the runaway billionaire fell in love and everything was magically perfect. They still had problems. They still had bills and arguments and days when nothing went right. But they had each other, and Sophie, and a house that smelled like coffee and motor oil and whatever Victoria was attempting to cook. They had Sunday breakfasts and movie nights in a garage with a crooked sign that represented every impossible thing they'd built together. 1 year after Victoria crashed her car near the Portland docks, she sat at the kitchen table filling out paperwork. Not corporate documents this time. Not financial reports or merger proposals. Adoption papers. Sophie had asked about it first, tentatively, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to want it. She'd said she knew Victoria wasn't her mom, but maybe she could be something official anyway. Something legal. Something permanent. Victoria had cried. Ethan had cried. Sophie had rolled her eyes and said grown-ups were weird, but she was smiling. Now Victoria stared at the forms, pen hovering over the signature line. You don't have to, Ethan said from across the table. If it's too much, if you're not ready... I'm terrified, Victoria interrupted. I'm absolutely terrified. What if I'm not good enough? What if I screw this up? What if... You won't. You don't know that. Yeah, I do, as son. Ethan reached across and took her hand. You know how I know? Because you showed up. Because when things got hard, you stayed. Because every single day for the last year, you've chosen us. That's what being a parent is. Not perfection, just showing up. Victoria looked at him, then at the papers, then back at him. Then she picked up the pen and signed. The adoption went through 4 months later. They celebrated with ice cream and a certificate that Sophie insisted on hanging in her room. She didn't call Victoria Mom, still called her Vic. But the way she said it carried weight now, carried belonging. At night, when Ethan couldn't sleep, he'd walk through the house checking on things. The garage where tomorrow's projects waited. Sophie's room where drawings covered every wall. The kitchen where Victoria had finally learned to make coffee without breaking the machine. And he'd think about how strange life was. How you could lose everything and gain something better. How a single decision to help a stranger could unravel your entire existence and somehow put it back together in a way that actually worked. People asked him sometimes how it happened. How the mechanic ended up with the billionaire. How they made it work. Like there was a formula. Like there was a secret. But there wasn't. There was just two broken people who stumbled into each other's lives at exactly the wrong moment and somehow made it the right one. There was just choosing each other every day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. There was just love. The messy, complicated, imperfect kind that didn't fit in boardrooms or fairy tales, but existed anyway in the space between who you were and who you wanted to become. 5 years after the car crash, Ethan stood in his garage working on a vintage Triumph. Sophie, 13 now, impossibly tall, smarter than both her parents combined, was supposed to be doing homework, but was instead teaching Victoria how to change oil. No, you have to loosen it first, Sophie explained patiently. Like this. I'm doing that. You're stripping the threads. I'm not stripping... Okay, maybe I'm stripping them a little. Ethan smiled without looking up from his work. In the house, dinner was burning because Victoria had gotten distracted. They'd order pizza later. Sophie would complain about her geometry homework. Victoria would explain it using business concepts until it made sense. They'd watch something on TV, all three of them crammed on the couch. It was ordinary. It was beautiful. It was exactly what Victoria had walked away from billions of dollars to find. "Dad?" Sophie called over. "Can you show Vic how to do this before she breaks something?" "I'm not going to break." The sound of something metallic hitting the ground interrupted her. "You were saying?" Sophie asked innocently. Victoria picked up the part she'd dropped, laughing at herself. "Fine, yes, I need help. I'm terrible at this." "You're learning," Ethan said, moving to show her the right technique. "That's different than being terrible." "Is there a difference?" "Always." They worked together until the sun set and the garage got too dark to see properly. Then they went inside to the burnt dinner and the homework and the ordinary chaos of family life. Victoria had never been happier. Ethan had never felt more complete. And Sophie, who'd spent the first 8 years of her life feeling like she wasn't enough, finally understood what it meant to be chosen. That's what nobody tells you about love. It's not about grand gestures or perfect moments. It's not about having everything figured out or being anything other than exactly who you are. It's about finding people who see your broken pieces and don't try to fix them, who see your flaws and love you anyway, who show up on the hard days and the boring days and the days when nothing special happens except you're together. It's about building something real from the ashes of what came before. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it's about a single father nobody noticed saving a woman everyone feared, and both of them discovering that being seen is the first step toward being loved. They didn't live happily ever after because that's not how life works. They lived imperfectly ever after, which is better anyway. They fought and made up and fought again. They struggled with money and schedules and teenage attitudes. They failed at things and succeeded at others and mostly just kept going because that's what families do. But every night when Ethan checked on Sophie before bed and found Victoria already there reading some fantasy novel in different voices, he knew he'd make the same choice 1,000 times over. He'd stop at that car crash. He'd pull her from the wreckage. He'd risk everything to give her a chance. Because some people are worth saving. And sometimes, in the process of saving them, you save yourself too. That's the thing about broken people finding each other. They don't fix each other. They just build something new from the pieces they have left. Something stronger for having been shattered first. Something real. And in a world that's constantly selling you perfection, real is the rarest thing of all.